Coming up in our next installment of America's Hope, two dynamic Chinese American women making a change not only for their communities but for the world. We'll meet Miss NTD, Cynthia Sun, and successful attorney Elizabeth Yang, and how she's championing the cause for mental health awareness. All that and more on America's Hope. Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright, and this is America's Hope. And one of the things that we'd like to do here at NTD and EPIC is to give you truth as well as tradition and focus on information and inspiration. All of it ties in collectively to this wonderful gift that we have in humanity, and that's hope. It's a God-given gift. Can't be taken away. Even though we face persecution and so many things, we still boldly and courageously uphold the principles of hope, and we find that that prevails. There are powerful narratives throughout the world and here in America about people who are resilient, and they keep holding on to a hope that causes them to bring about effective transformation and reconciliation. And so tonight we're going to introduce you to the person who just received the crown as NTD, Miss NTD. Her name is Cynthia Sun. We'll be talking to her. And then later on tonight, we'll also introduce you to Elizabeth Yang. We'll hear her cause in trying to help people in her community deal with mental health and overcome the tragedy that unfolded there with a mass shooting. All that and more tonight on America's Hope. Let's get started. Our next guest right now is an attorney who's been practicing law in the state of California since 2007. Her name is Elizabeth Yang. Her story of getting to this wonderful position in order to help people is quite incredible and remarkable. Elizabeth, you're joining us this hour on America's Hope, and we're grateful that you did. I'd like to start with first talking about your background, and before we even get into the fact that you're now practicing law. But I will say, to quote about law, like truth and justice, it lives within us. Like virtue and the moral law, it is a companion of the soul. The law, the truth and justice and information and inspiration is something that has followed you all of your life. Tell us how it all began for you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So nice to be here, speaking with you, Kelly. So family comes from China, and my grandfather was in the Air Force. He took my grandmother and left China, and my parents are from Taiwan. They were able to immigrate here, escape communist China during the war. And I was fortunate enough to be born in California and raised in California. So education and working hard has always been values in my family. My family taught me how to study hard, get straight A's, work hard, become an engineer, and then now an attorney. So as an electrical engineering background, I started off practicing intellectual property law. And now I do not just IP law, but also business law, family law, as well as estate planning.
You know, it's an incredible journey that you've had in terms of your education, in terms of your family's development and coming here to America. We can't lightly pass over the fact that they were able to get here and to escape communist China. How did that impact your parents and you in terms of how they raised you?
Well, there's definitely are challenges coming to a brand new country where my parents didn't know the language when they immigrated here. They didn't know the culture. And when I was raised here, even though I was born and raised in the United States, English was my second language. I was raised to speak Chinese at home. I didn't learn how to speak English until I started going to school. And I was brought up with very traditional Chinese Asian cultures. Um, One of the biggest values that I've learned, that there's a big culture gap between America and the Chinese culture, is this philosophy of paleophiety. In Chinese, the terms are 孝顺, which is very frequently used. As a child, everything is about being 孝顺. But in the American culture, most people have not even heard the terms filial piety, which translates to honoring, respecting your elders and your parents to the point where you're supposed to take care of them for the rest of their lives when they get older. And in America, the philosophy is once you turn 18, you're supposed to go, flock the nest and become independent. And that's how parents can prove that they're successful, if they're able to make their children independent. But in the Asian culture, in the Chinese culture, if the child flocks the nest and does not return to take care of the elders, then they've failed as parents. My mom would rather die than go to a senior citizen center.
I totally agree with you. It's the same way in my family, where we take care of each other even when we get to a senior citizen status. We would rather take care of them than to see them go into a home or a group home, but try to do our best that we can take care of them. I want to talk to you about the merging of your Chinese culture, your Taiwanese culture, and your American culture, because it seems that it has made you a valuable attorney and also a great parent yourself, raising your own two children. America needs to be reminded of truth and tradition and information that can give us inspiration to have hope. Why practicing law, and especially with your engineering background, engineers make great attorneys, by the way, as I understand it, all of these things that you've been able to merge together, what do you think is the bedrock of your faith, your hope, and love for your family and for this country?
My main office is in the city of Monterey Park, where I reside. And Monterey Park is predominantly Chinese. There's a lot of elderly folks here, and majority of my clients from the Monterey Park area are Chinese. So there's a huge need for Chinese speaking attorneys in our neighborhood. There's not enough, and there's so many new immigrants that come here. They don't know the language, they don't understand the law, and they're very lost, without folks who can handhold them in this new country, and not just help them with the language, but understand the U.S. culture, the U.S. law, how things are done here, so that they can be proper citizens and assimilate. Earlier this year, you probably heard of the mass shootings in Monterey
Yeah.
Park. That occurred right across the street from my law office at the ballroom dancing studio, where I frequented as a ballroom dancer. I went there Monday evenings after work and would dance with the rest of the group before I went home for dinner. So that was a huge shock to our community. And one of the main things um, that cause it is mental health, and I see a lot of mental health issues in my divorcing clients, who are going through very challenging times. I see mental health issues in the aging population here in Monterey Park, who are getting older, but who are not used to the fact that their Americanized um, children are now raising their own families, maybe in another state on the other side of the nation, and they're having to fend for themselves at an elderly age. Whereas if they were in China still, there would probably be three generations living underneath the same roof. So there's a lot of challenges that immigrants who come to the U.S. end up facing, and mental health becomes a very predominant result that there's just not enough awareness about.
Take me back to that day of that mass shooting, and in the moments or the days that followed that, how you started going to work to help people deal with the crisis that unfolded as a result of that, please?
It was actually during the Lunar New Year, which is one of the biggest celebrations in the Chinese culture. And we had a Lunar New Year festival right on the streets of Garvey Avenue outside my office. It was actually the first festival since the pandemic because during the pandemic that festival had been canceled. So everyone was celebrating when this huge tragedy occurred, and there was a lot of chaos. Even the weeks that um, came about afterwards, our city was not used to the amount of press that we got. We had nationwide coverage from reporters just swarming the little community. Um, President Biden, the vice president, they actually all came and visited, which, it was a great gesture. But the Monterey Park City is a very small city that is not used to so much press. And Asians in general are very private people. Like my family, for example, my mother, even though she was a ballroom dancer at Star Ballroom too, she would not speak to a single reporter.
Hmm.
And this was the same for a lot of the families of the victims and the folks who had been personally affected. They were scared by the amount of press and the reporters. So I felt like for me, because I'm an attorney in the community and I'm also one of the business improvement district commissioners of Monterey Park, and I felt like I had to speak on behalf of the population for those who were either not fluent in English or there was a culture gap where they were just not willing to come into the limelight and speak. So I spent a lot of hours and days during that time just trying to share the story with as many people as possible to speak on behalf of the victims.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about what's happened as since then, and how you, through your law firm and just through your life, you're making inroads into letting people know just how great a community this is, and how wonderful it is to see that there's still hope uh, coming forward as a result of this unfortunate circumstance, this tragedy. I'm talking to Elizabeth Yang. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Elizabeth Yang. She is an attorney. I think one of the most noteworthy things that you've accomplished is that you were tested under fire. Courage is often tested under fire, and that unfortunately happened as a result of the mass shooting that took place in your community. And you stepped forward to represent the Taiwanese and Chinese community in a way that people could really understand what was going on. I'd like to ask you about hope in the midst of this adversity, the tragedy, and the conflict. Uh, is it visible now in your community?
They say challenges are blessings in disguise, and there has been hope and resilience that's come out about from this tragedy. It's really brought the Monterey Park citizens together. We have a big banner on the major street that says, "We unify in dance," and the dancers, even though the Star Ballroom dance studio was shut down, they have found other avenues to dance. And Monterey Park has actually set up a resiliency center for folks to come and get mental health support, to bring groups together so that they can talk about challenges and stressful issues and have a place to vent and release. It's definitely a work in progress. There's still a lot of folks who have not grieved properly,
Mm.
have just done the typical Chinese thing, which is to shove the challenges under the rug and try to not talk about it and hope that it will go away one day, which is not the proper way of grieving, but it's the Chinese way of grieving. For me, I have a lot of personal experience with that because when my father immigrated to the U.S., he underwent so many challenges with the language, the culture, the raising a family, uh, dealing with a brand new country. He ended up committing suicide when I was 3 years old. And my mom, who in the Chinese culture is all about having a value of saving face. Reputation means so much in the Chinese culture. So she never spoke about her husband's death. And she would just tell the community that her husband was always busy working, and that's why he wasn't around. So as my brother and I was raised in this environment, we never knew what happened to her father. I grew up always wondering, is my dad, um, is he just like a deadbeat father who abandoned us, and maybe he's out in the world somewhere, and maybe I'll get to meet him someday, or maybe he died from a car accident, maybe it was cancer. It was just a lot of questions always in my head until I was 21. That's when I finally gained the courage to sit my mom down and really get the truth out of her. But before then, any time I would bring up the question, it would just always be like silence, or she's very good about changing the topic. And so in the Asian culture, it's all about suppressing, the
Mhm.
truth, and not expressing. And expression counters depression. So it's really important that now, with the Monterey Park tragedy and with everything that's going on, that we really bring mental health awareness, as a big issue, and let the population know that vulnerability is indeed strength. Whereas, most Chinese people, they don't think vulnerability is strength. They think vulnerability leads to judgment and leads to a lot of negative things.
And I'd like to express my my condolences to you for that, and I'm sorry to hear that all of that unfolded in your life. When you discover that you're only 21 years of age, you finally get to the truth. What was your response, and how did you turn it around to continue with your life?
Yeah, so when I found out about what happened to my father, um, I had, for the first 20 years of my life, been telling a lie. I was telling all my friends, my classmates, that, oh, yeah, my father is busy working, and that's why he's not at my birthday party. That's why he's not at my parent teacher conference. That's why he's not at my graduation. So it was very difficult to switch from that lie, that story that I've been telling my whole life, to this sudden truth, this very extreme truth that I learned. So for the next 10 years, from 21 through 31, I continued telling the same story. I never revealed the truth, even though I learned about it. And it wasn't until my 30s, when I went through a series of personal development courses, transformational trainings, that I really learned about the true strength of vulnerability, and how sharing one story isn't just a way to free myself from self judgment, but it's also a way to inspire others. Because every challenge that any person is going through, we're not the only human being going through
Mm.
that challenge. So many people can relate. I'm not the only person whose parent, committed suicide. There's so many other ones that have gone through it. But by me telling my story, it's going to tell other people that, hey, it's okay too that you went through this. Don't judge yourself. And we're just everyone's here trying to live life and get through life as best as they can.
How do you see the law and using the law to help people become successful in their quest to get the kind of mental health and hope they richly need?
So the law creates opportunities for resources. And after the mass shooting, I actually created a nonprofit called AMM, Asian Minds Matter. And I'm currently working on creating easy access to resources for new immigrants who might not know how to go on the web and navigate through all the different websites out there to find the right resources, even if they were willing to go and take that step to get support. So the first step is for them to know that it's okay to go out and get support. But the second step is once they make that decision, we need to have those resources readily available for them. And at this current time, even with my legal background, my education, it's been very challenging for me to find bilingual counselors, bilingual therapists, coaches who are able to support people in need. I've had a very hard time finding folks who can speak Chinese, who are certified and licensed professionals in that arena. And so if I have a hard time finding it, I can't even imagine how someone who barely speaks English is going to be able to access those resources. So that's what I'm working on right now, getting the resources out there, and then perhaps changing the law, going into our legislators and telling them, look, you guys need to change the law to make these resources available to our new immigrants.
So you have 5 law firms, law offices, I should say, there. And how can people contact you to help you with your nonprofit effort to help people get the kind of support they need through the law, but also through just the social process of coming to a new country and learning its norms and its customs, and then trying to break free from their own culture?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone knows of or is a bilingual professional in the mental health industry, feel free to reach out to me. My website is yanglawoffices.com. We have a contact us page on there. And I also have an Instagram account. It's at Yang Law Offices. They can message me directly on there as well.
You're taking that on and you're trying to unblock the flow of the kind of progress that's needed in your community to remove the barriers to finding good mental health. And I'm glad you came on this program. Elizabeth, why have you not given up on hope for America and for people?
There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. I believe in anything is possible, and America is still very young, in the grand scheme of things. We only have 200 some years of history as compared to China's, thousands and thousands of years of history. So we have a lot of possibilities, and we can be this one country in the world that is a melting pot where everyone comes together and is still able to thrive. I truly believe in that.
Elizabeth Yang, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for this opportunity.
It's been a pleasure. We're back with more in just a moment. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright, and I want to talk about a very important topic right now, but it's amazing how all of this comes together in the form of a wonderful global Chinese beauty pageant that is presented by NTD. Let me introduce to you Miss NTD, Cynthia Sun. Good to have you in. I'm honored to have you. Particularly on the heels of becoming Miss NTD.
Winner of Miss NTD 2023 is
number 11, Cynthia Sun.
Let me ask you first of all, what that meant for you when you realized that you were crowned, because as we're showing video images of it right now, you were quite surprised.
Yeah, I actually had said this in a preliminary interview a few days before the grand final. I didn't even think I would get into top 16, nonetheless top 6, nonetheless top 2, and then now I was crowned Miss NTD. So it was really a dream come true, but also completely unexpected, out of left field for me. All of the contestants had such a deep connection with their Chinese heritage, and also they've had such upbringing in that they're all very traditional Chinese women who embrace the virtues of this crown, and they can memorize and recite all of the dynasties in order backwards and forwards, and they know all of the stories behind the 4 great beautiful women in Chinese history, all of the queens and all of the princesses and all of the the rise and fall of Chinese dynasties. And I felt like it was very surprising, but also very heartwarming to know that as a Chinese American, I can actually embody these traditional Chinese values inside myself and present them to the world. And I think my message just got across to the panelists that night. And I think that's why I won.
Obviously. And what's your message to the panelists that night that you gave?
I think I was just very honest. I told them that as a Chinese American woman, I was working very hard to reconnect and rejoice in my traditional Chinese heritage, which I felt like had been unlinked and unattached from me for so long. And I felt like I'm not completely considered American in America. I'm not considered, Chinese in China. And although that's the case, I feel like, it's possible to bridge both cultures, bridge both modern and traditional, and present that in myself, and that's who I actually am as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you are who you have become.
Thank you.
And it all started for you with your family coming here to America. And let's be honest, you are definitely American. Houston, Texas, you can't get any more American than deep in the heart of Texas. Yes. So talk to me about your parents' travel to America, why they came to the United States, to provide a better life, obviously, for you and your brother.
Yeah, so they've been in China all their lives. My dad actually studied abroad in Germany for some time, and in 1989, obviously everyone knows about the Tiananmen Square massacre. Both of my parents actually went to protest and try to fight for democracy, and there was a lot of hope at that time that the country would turn around, but as history has shown that the Chinese Communist Party is still very much in power. And so, in the 90s, they really wanted to, open a new path and, take this gamble. And so they both moved to Houston and started their careers there, started, their home there. And I was born in Houston in 1999. So I was very blessed to have, such amazing parents who have inspired me to also blaze my own trail.
That's good that they encouraged you to do that, and the trail that you've blazed has led to international relations with a specific goal on focusing on human rights. Talk to me about that in terms of what you have been doing and what you will most likely continue to do.
So actually, when I went to the University of Texas for the first time, for the first 2 years I was really lost. I didn't feel like I was good at STEM. I didn't feel like I was very interested in going into liberal arts or any other majors. But in junior year, I actually had the opportunity to go to Geneva for the study abroad opportunity. And, we would travel to the United Nations and go see the World Bank or the Red Cross. And all of those opportunities really made me realize how important human rights is, but also as a nexus of the larger picture on how it really affects national security, how it affects economy, and how it affects, how individuals treat each other as well. Like I feel like a society that really treasures human rights as the center and those virtues will become much more prosperous because you have this foundation that's already laid of treating each other kindly, of the government respecting the citizens and respecting other countries and having this open multilateral diplomacy where it's not just about big guns, big boats, big ships, big airplanes. It's not about just pouring money. It's actually about like meaningful and substantive action towards bettering everybody's lives as a whole.
You've actually, we were talking before the interview, you have actually visited China. Talk to me about your experiences there that you recall.
I mean, I have very fond memories of China as, a country that has had 5,000 years of heritage. I have very fond memories of, my Chinese relatives and friends that I made along the way. But I was very shocked to actually, when I was 12 years old, I went back to Inner Mongolia, where I had actually spent many years as a toddler. And as soon as I got there, it was like the police knew what time my airplane was landing. It was like they had tracked my taxi, because as soon as I got into the door of my grandparents' home, they were knocking. And 3 policemen showed up. I opened the door, and all I see is empty air because they're actually a head shorter than me when I was 12 years old. Yeah. And they were asking me, hey, can you come with us to the police station? And I just thought it was so absurd because I knew exactly why they were there. I've heard about the persecution since I was young. I was born only 2 weeks before the persecution of Falun Gong began. And hearing about it since I was young, and meeting other friends who had escaped from torture, or their parents had fled from religious persecution. I knew exactly why they were there. I knew they wanted to interrogate me about my faith. They didn't want me to give my grandparents any ideas about free thought or American culture, or inspire them to join us in America as a family. And so I barely had a conversation. I said hello to my grandparents, and then I was like completely cut off. The policemen were there. My dad was very terrified, and so we actually had to leave the house as my uncle was buying another ticket back to Shanghai. And we left the house, made rounds around the mall to try to, get them off our tail. We took out our batteries of our phone, and, we were trying our best to just keep them away from our relatives so that at least they wouldn't be harassed, so we could, try to make this as seamless as possible, as least disruptive as possible, because that was the last thing we thought would happen. Honestly, I thought I would have 3 days of reunion, of family dinners, of updating them, telling them how I'm doing in junior high, how I've learned a lot of English, and how I really miss them, and all of that was pretty much cut short. And after we had gotten back to my grandparents' house, we immediately left for the airport, and we immediately went to Shanghai because we just didn't want to be a bother to my grandparents, because they're so
Cynthia,
old.
That tale is a harrowing tale, and it's heartbreaking because you're trying to bond with your grandparents, your grandmother, and show her the love that you have for her. I'm a grandfather. I love when my grandchildren are around me.
Yeah.
And to have that taken away and stripped away because of my faith, it's unconscionable. And yet, at that tender age of 12 years old, it put an image in your heart and mind that you've never lost sight of. What did that compel you to do upon returning to the United States and beginning your path forward to do what you do now, working in international relations, fighting for human rights, and also making the world, or helping the world, understand the plight of those who practice Falun Dafa, Falun Gong, even Christians and Uyghurs who are persecuted by the CCP.
I think it really spurred me on to do more research into it, ask my parents, how are my grandparents, have they, been visited by the police more than that? Is this a normal occurrence? How could they know that this was happening and that we were there and what we were planning to do? It seemed like they had everything in the palm of their hands, and it just really baffled me because I didn't know anything about surveillance. I didn't know anything about censorship. I had no idea what any of those words meant. And I think in high school we were, reading George Orwell, and so it clicked for me. And after that, it was just, my AP capstone was done on this topic. I, did a lot of research on it, and a lot of my PowerPoint slides, group projects, I tried to bring in human rights to everything, because it really does affect all of us, even if we don't see it, because people who visit China, they're only shown a part of China that's meant for tourists. Not many people would go to Xinjiang, for example, or Tibet, or really, have access to these people that are persecuted in these communities, these millions of people, because the government is monitoring them, making sure they can't go outside during the Beijing Olympics, making sure their social credit's so low that sometimes their Wi-Fi is cut off, their bank account is cut off, they don't have money to travel anywhere, much less get a passport, because their passport has been revoked. So I feel like throughout this entire process, it really shows how much my family has had to go through, and also how other families had to go through. And I feel like I've communicated and connected really well with a lot of other families who are going through the same thing, because then we can share experiences, we can, put together more information for other people and present that to the world in a way that hasn't been done before, I believe, because it's very personal.
It's very personal indeed, and I appreciate you being transparent and open to expressing what's going on and letting people here in the Western world know that. I want to talk to you a little bit more. Can we keep you for a little bit
Yeah,
longer?
of course, of course,
All right.
of
We're
course.
going to take a break. We'll come right back with more of my interview with Miss NTD, Cynthia Sun. That's next on America's Hope. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Cynthia Sun. So now that you have this platform, how will you utilize it?
I'm still trying to reunite families. I hope that I can still have the honor of hearing their stories and everything that they've gone through, because I always say that we want to give a voice to the voiceless. And I feel like that really encapsulates my current career and the path that I want to go for, like going forward from now. It's really such a shame that a lot of these stories get lost, because there's 8 billion people in the world. It's not like we can always, hear everybody's stories, but I find it really encouraging how resilient they are and how uplifting and optimistic they are. For example, there's this 18-year-old high school girl in upstate New York who I had the pleasure of meeting last year, and both of her parents are missing. They've been in prison
Missing in China.
They've been in Chinese prison since 3 years ago, captured for their faith, for Falun Gong. And she's pretty much been growing up alone by herself in New York. And she graduated high school this year, just a few months ago. She turned 18 this year without her parents. And right now her future is very uncertain. She doesn't know if her parents are alive or dead. But just the optimism she brings and the fact that she has that belief and that hope that her parents are out there somewhere and there will be a day where they reunite is just unspeakable how incredible that spirit is. And I wish I could share that with other people.
Well, you're doing that, my friend. You're sharing that spirit right now. And you've personally undergone something similar when your grandmother passed. Take me back down memory lane and what happened and how you discovered your grandmother's death, who had, by the way, had been living in China.
Yeah, so my grandmother actually raised me when I was a toddler, and then when I was 3 years old, I came back to Houston to start pre-K, and she came back with me. And most of my elementary, I just remember, she was always there every single time I came home. She always had like fruit cut up, ready to eat. She was always, cleaning the house, helping me fold my laundry, teaching me, or I was teaching her how to use English. She was teaching me, how to say things in Chinese that I didn't normally say. And, I really thought that, when I was 12, that trip to China that I mentioned before would be the time where I could have, bonding time with her again, because I really missed her. And that trip was cut short, obviously. And a few months later, my mother actually came into my bedroom, and I hadn't fallen asleep at that time, but she thought I did, and she was just like weeping for a really long time. And yeah, and that's when I knew. Yeah, and my mom is actually blacklisted from going back to China, so she hasn't been back in 30 years now.
So your mom was not able to attend the funeral.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
So Cynthia, these stories that you tell me also demonstrate the power of your faith, your hope, and your perseverance. And I can see why you have been crowned Miss NTD, because there's a scripture that says perseverance produces character. And character produces hope. And hope is never extinguished when you continue to do good in the face of things that are happening around you that's bad. And so you should never be weary in your well-doing. And I commend you for being as young as you are, as brilliant as you are, and as dedicated as you are. And based on all that you've been through, even the 18-year-old friend that you talked about, and certainly we'd like to extend our prayers to her as she strives to become the woman that she's destined to be, which I believe is a woman of greatness. I would just like to encourage you to keep encouraging others.
Thank you so much.
And that's what this program's all about. We call it America's Hope, but it's really a global hope. And the power of your narrative, you said 8 billion people. All of those 8 billion people, most of them have hope. But a lot of times is extinguished by the adversaries against that hope. CCP, other communist regimes that want to put people down rather than lift them up. So what's your hope for America based on being the woman that you're becoming?
I just hope that everyone can embrace their heritage and keep their faith no matter what happens. I think that's really important in moving a society forward, and that's also very important in motivating us and propelling ourselves as individuals to face these tribulations head on, to overcome obstacles, because life will be full of obstacles. And it's really important to know your roots, be true to your soul. And I think if they're clear-headed about that, then, there's hope for America.
Indeed, and you're educating a lot of us about that. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Miss NTD.
It's still sinking in.
Still sinking in. Yeah. Well, thank you for taking time out to stop and talk to us on America's Hope. Her name is Cynthia Sun, and she's letting the sun shine wherever she goes, and that's light shining in darkness, hope over despair, faith over fear. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'd like to thank our guests tonight, Elizabeth Yang and Cynthia Sun, Miss NTD. In my final word tonight, I look at what both of these women have accomplished and what they're seeking to do. Both are seeking to bring about change, transformation in their communities, and then expanding hope beyond their communities to all of America and thereby the world. I've often said on this program that hope is born in the midst of adversity and conflict. It does not come without a challenge. And as Elizabeth Yang has stated, we must look at our challenges as blessings and turn that into a power and a hope that speaks to people in their point of despair and gives them faith over fear and strength to win. And that, my friends, means spreading love, freedom, and peace, and never letting hope be extinguished. Until next time, America, good night.
In my America, my children are black and white, one shade of beautiful, so precious in God's sight. In my America, all lives matter, so let's stop the chatter that tears us apart. We are a family, together you and me, agreeing to disagree, but still live in harmony. The dream that gives hope to us is as strong as it ever was. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. In my America, there is no left or right. We're all on common ground. Darkness gives way to light. In my America, you give more than you take. And when someone has lost their way, you lend them a hand and say, we are a family. but still live in harmony. The dream that gives hope to us is as strong as it ever was. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. We are brothers. I'm not my brother's killer, but I am your keeper. We are sisters. The greatness of our nation starts in the homes of its people. What's in your house? We are family. Together, you and me, agreeing to disagree, but still live in harmony. The dream that gives hope to us is as strong as it ever was. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. From sea to shining sea, I believe in God, I believe in you, and I believe in we.
America and my America.
United we stand, divided